Hello and welcome everyone who's joining. We are going to give it just a few minutes as we have some more folks join us. Hello everyone and welcome to part 3 of our opioid education series, Coping on Campus. We want to thank Immaculata and the Opioid Task Force for making today's event possible, making this series possible. So far in this series, we have learned about the impact of opioid use disorders. We have also gained an understanding of opioid use disorders, the science behind addiction, early warning signs, and treatment for opioid use disorders. We have really gotten a thorough understanding of how we can combat this national epidemic. If you were not able to join us for these first few events, they were recorded and will be made available to you. So we strongly encourage you to watch the understanding the opioid epidemic as well as the impact of opioid use disorders. Today, we will be talking about the concept of coping. What we have learned so far is that people turn to substance use and opioids for a variety of reasons. Some of these reasons include things like emotional pain, physical pain, unmanaged stress. We felt it was important to provide you with some information about how to cope in a healthy way with the stressors and challenges that are natural to being a college student these days. So before we get started, we are going to just go over some housekeeping things. And first, if we could just point you to the bottom of your screen, the question and answer feature. So we really want today to be as interactive as possible. We want to hear from you about what you want to know, what's most relevant to you, what you'd hope to get out of today's session. So we do encourage you to use the question and answer feature. We have a time designated at the end of the presentation for all of our experts today to answer your questions. If we could go to the next slide. Following today's discussion, there will be a survey that will go out to the email address that you registered with. We would really appreciate all feedback from you regarding today's presentation. Now I'd like to just tell you a little bit about Caron Treatment Centers and the reason for this partnership with Immaculata University. So Caron Treatment Centers is a national leader in behavioral healthcare. I don't know, did we just lose the? Okay, so Caron Treatment Centers is a national leader in behavioral healthcare and addiction treatment for over 60 years. We have a full spectrum of treatment programs that meet the needs from everyone from teenagers to older adults. We have an opioid use disorder treatment program specifically to address these concerns that we have discussed in this series. And we felt that it's always very important for us to take our expertise as a leader in substance use treatment and share this with campuses, colleges, and universities to provide all of the best information and support to their students. So if we could go to the next slide. So today we will have presenters from both Immaculata University and Caron Treatment Centers. We are extremely excited to hear from all of them. So first, we will have Dr. David Martinson, who is a professor and field site coordinator at Immaculata University. He will be sharing with us some information about stress, healthy coping skills, and unhealthy coping skills. Next, we will hear from Adam Lush, who is the Regional Resource Director for Caron Treatment Centers. He'll be sharing about his personal experience as a college student, dealing with challenges, the stress that comes with being a college student, and using some unhealthy coping skills, how he eventually got connected to support services and began to utilize healthy coping skills. Next, we'll hear from Chris O'Reilly, who will be talking in more depth about coping skills. He is the Executive Director of Caron Counseling Services. He'll be really going into greater detail about mindfulness. And finally, we'll hear from Jessica Gilbert, who is the Director of Counseling Services at Immaculata University. And she'll be talking about all of the amazing supports that are available right on campus for Immaculata students and how one would go about accessing those. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Martinson, who will kick us off today.
Great, thank you very much, Allie. I appreciate it. And welcome everyone to this third part of our series. Just to give you a little bit of background in case you haven't joined us for the other webinar pieces, we have at Immaculata applied and received a grant from DDAP in Pennsylvania, which is the Drug and Alcohol Programs. And with that grant, we wanted to put together information that would help people understand what they need to know about opioid prevention, and to do this proactively, knowing that we are dealing with an epidemic in the United States, and being able to be proactive about this was our goal at Immaculata. We formed an opioid task force team, which Ali just mentioned, and through our collaboration with the Caron Foundation and the Caron Center, we're able to put together these three webinars. We have kind of done an overview, as Ali mentioned, and got into treatment specifics last week. And now we're getting into what I call the nitty gritty of all of this, and focusing on some of the basic issues that are the underlying foundational elements connected with the topics that we've been covering. And as we get into this material, I'll just give you a little bit of background. I've obviously been a student myself. I'm a professor at Immaculata. Been an undergrad student. I've been a graduate student, and there are all kinds of stressors connected with those roles. But there are none of us who are immune to stress. And so, as we get into some of this material today, I'm just going to do a quick overview of stress and coping. And then we're going to have the ability to be able to listen a little bit to Adam's story, and Chris and Jessica, and some of the resources that we have at Immaculata University that are available to our students. So if we can go to the first slide, I don't know if, yeah, okay. Let's go on to the second slide here. We'll move on. I put my contact information in there in case anybody wants to reach out to me after this particular webinar, or if you're watching this via recording, you'll have my email address. But let's just talk about coping and start the topic of trying to define what coping is and what are we coping with, more importantly. As we begin this discussion, we can't help but go back to the basics, and the focus that we are starting with today is stress, and it's something that we are all dealing with. It doesn't matter where you are in your life, you are going to be encountering stress. And just a couple weeks ago, we were playing this Jenga game. I don't know if you guys have played this, but part of the Jenga game, obviously, is you pull these pieces out, and then you start to see this Jenga structure start to become more and more unstable. And I use this picture in my thinking about this connected with stress, as we are affected by different things that happen in our life. It's kind of like pulling one of those pieces out. Our life becomes a little bit more unstable, each one of those pieces that we pull out. And we are dealing with everything from everyday stress, stressors that are going on. Everything's kind of compounded now, I think. And but we have these everyday stresses that we're dealing with from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed. And that is something that we learn how to deal with from a very early age. We try to find a way to handle the stress that we're dealing with in life. Some of us have learned to self-soothe. Some of us have learned to be able to be soothed by others. A lot of this happens very early on in our development as a child. And yet then we run across different events that happen in our lives as we go through our lives. And I call these life events, experiences that most of us go through. And these are changes that are happening that we experience as we go through development and as we change our context of where we live, relationships that we're connected with. Obviously, a big stressor that most people have to face is kindergarten and first grade. As you're getting into elementary school and in middle school and in high school and you get into college, you're a freshman in college and trying to figure all of this out. And then you got COVID-19 on top of all of that. And you're like, coping on campus. This was a topic for today. And we're not even on campus. We're doing virtual counseling or virtual classes. And I'm happy to announce that Immaculata is going back to on-campus instruction on the 19th of October. And I know that we're all looking for a way to get back to some sort of normalcy. But school and then job. Many of you guys are working jobs while you're going to school. Obviously, that's something you're focused on when you're going to school and getting that career or the job that you are looking for and wanting. There's all kinds of stressors connected with the relationships. And then we have the crises that happen in our life. I was speaking to a student the other day who had been driving down a back road in Pennsylvania and had hit a deer and had killed that deer. And she pulled over, basically put everything aside and was very thankful she was alive. And yet this completely disrupted her day, obviously, and was a difficult crisis to go through in that particular day. So we have these things that we experience. Sometimes they're unexpected. Sometimes we can predict, or there can be that anticipatory piece to that we know these things are coming up, and we're going to have to tackle them. Some of the stressors that we deal with are internal. We create stress for ourselves, and we could go into a whole another webinar about how that happens. But that internal stress and external stress are something we all deal with as human beings. And then we have extraordinary events. These events that include loss, a person that's close to us who has died. Maybe there's a suicide. Maybe there's a struggle with the breakup in a relationship. And these extraordinary events, these losses, sometimes major crises that are going on in our lives, and sometimes even traumatic events that happen to us. And many of us fall into that category. And we're trying to deal with all of this. This is part of our lives living on this earth. And on a very basic level, going through all of this list, and you think, wow, we have a lot to deal with. It throws us into disequilibrium. Our homeostasis, or that balance that we have, or try to keep in our life, is thrown off kilter. And as we try to bring that back into balance, we do all kinds of things to try to help us learn how to cope with these events. Yet there are times when there is that stressor. And research shows that once you pile up enough stress on a person, eventually there's the straw that breaks the camel's back, which is the reason for this second picture here. eventually there'll be one straw that will break the camel's back if you put enough straws on that back. And you think, well, that one straw, it seems so insignificant, but really, it's the cumulative effect of all of these things that we have to deal with in life. That one straw could be something very simple, like you had a flat tire and that throws you off balance. Or it could be something major that's been going on or that happened unexpectedly. But we find a way to try to bring our lives back into balance. And how do we do that? If we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about, let's see here, how we react to stress. The good news is, in the research that I've done and that I've looked at, is that we react to stress by trying to get things back into balance, and most of us are pretty resilient. As human beings, we have learned to be resilient. We have learned to find a way to balance our lives. Some of us are better at it than others, and some of us have found very creative ways to get our lives into balance. But it's always a balancing act. And we're always trying to find a way to do that. We can go to the next slide. I want to point out stress is not always bad. People talk about stress, and usually it's talked about in the negative sense, but there is a thing called eustress. And you're like, I've never heard of that before. But eustress is the positive stress that we really all need to be able to accomplish things in life, in our lives. And this is stress that promotes wellness, health, growth. We all have to deal with some sort of stress in our lives. And there are those things that fall under that eustress category. But many of us think of stress as being more connected to distress, or this negative implication that happens when we experience an event. And this idea of feeling depleted, you might right now feel that you've lost energy in all the activities, losing sight of what you are wanting to focus on or have been focusing on. Sometimes that distress can lead to illness. And so there are a lot of negative consequences that comes out of distress. But the point is, there is stress that we're having to deal with. There's positive stress, there's negative stress. And finding a way to understand the difference between those two things and finding a way to cope with that stress is really what we want to encourage everyone to do, including for ourselves. Of course, everyone is at the point where they need to deal with stress and find ways to deal with that. So let's move on to the next slide. And I want to give you a quick overview. This is not going to be a long science lesson here, but a little bit about what I've learned over the years of studying stress and trauma and crisis in my role as a counselor and counselor educator, is that we have certain response systems that are kicked into gear, if you want to put it in those terms, when we react to stress. And the first one, I mean, you're going to know a lot of these things. You may not know where they come from or why you have it, but I'm going to go over some of the basics here. And this is connected with neurochemistry in the brain. So when you study this, it's fascinating and interesting, but I'm going to give you a quick overview. And the first one is epinephrine. You don't have to remember that word, but this is the fight or flight that kicks into gear when we deal with stress. And these are all protective features that we have as part of our body, as part of our brain. The second one is norepinephrine. This is what causes the startle response. You might be a person that is easily startled, and you might have a larger amount of norepinephrine running through your brain, which could be causing that. But that startle response is something that we have as a mechanism to cope with stressful events. And then there's serotonin. Many of you guys have heard of serotonin. You guys might know what's connected with this. Medicines that we might take, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SNRIs, are ways to increase serotonin in the brain cells. But this is a feel-good chemical. People who have higher levels of serotonin feel better. People who have lower levels of serotonin feel more depressed and feel lower and more depleted. And there are ways that we can manipulate serotonin, obviously by taking a medication that's prescribed, that can change the serotonin levels that we have in the brain. Drinking alcohol, using drugs also change serotonin levels in the brain. Exercise can change serotonin levels in the brain. But we do know those chemicals exist, and it's important to understand that when we have certain type of reactions, a lot of times this is connected to very normal neurochemistry in the brain that's connected to stressful events that we go through. Endorphins is something you know about. You may not know where it comes from, but this is nature's feel-good medicine or drug, I guess you could say. We have these chemicals in the brain that can be released. You run, you exercise, you swim, you play good music, you do something that encourages you, it connects with you personally. Graduating from high school, graduating from college, all these things can release endorphins in your brain. Eating food, relationships, endorphins are a very important part of our neurochemistry. And so knowing that these things exist, it's important for us because we can do things to help change that neurochemistry by how we act, what we do, what we ingest, and how we carry our lives. So if we can move on to the next slide. I'll give you a quick analogy. I got this when I was working in a psychiatric hospital in South Carolina. And the story goes like this. If there's a fire alarm, what do you do if a fire alarm goes off? We had this experience a couple of days ago at our home. Middle of the night, our smoke detector goes off. We all get up, we're running downstairs, trying to figure out where the smoke is, where the fire is. And there was no smoke, there was no fire, there was nothing. And no carbon monoxide that we could detect through that system. And it was just a fire alarm going off. Woke us up in the middle of the night. And we're thinking, what do we do? How do we get this thing to stop? And there's no smoke. We've looked through the whole house. What's happening here? And we're looking, online to try to find out what causes a fire alarm to go off when there's no smoke. And we're looking at humidity and dust and bugs and coming up with all kinds of solutions here. Now, we could have just unplugged that fire alarm and that noise would have gone away. But that would have been very helpful if there actually was a fire. And so if you move on to the metaphor of the aspirin, when a person has a headache, I'll just use that as an example. One thing you could do is to take an aspirin or an Advil or some other kind of medication, and the headache might go away. Now, your headache may be due to dehydration, and maybe the better thing to do is to take a drink of water or drink a bottle of water or something and not take that aspirin. And so the point of this little example here is that we can pull the plug on what's causing that symptomology, what's causing those alarm bells to go off. But we really need to be thinking about what is at the root cause of that headache, what's at the root cause of what's causing that alert system to go off in our bodies. And being able to think about something on that very basic level sometimes can help us understand, okay, aspirin is going to take care of the problem, it's going to get rid of the symptom, but maybe not get rid of the cause of that symptom. If we can move on to the next slide. And really, this is my final slide. I'm not much of a PowerPoint person, even though I use them in my classes, just mainly for illustration and to get the conversation started here today. But when we're dealing with stress, we focus on coping. How do we deal with stress individually? And this is a personal thing. Stress is personal. How we react to stress, our perceptions of stress. It's not the stressful event itself that causes problems for us. How we react to that is what scientists have figured out. And coping strategies is the same thing. I can't tell you that you need to use music, or that you need to use yoga, or that you need to eat Norwegian chocolates or something like that. That's going to really do it for you. It's a very personal thing. But there are some examples we're going to be talking about today, and I hope you listen carefully to what people are talking about in this webinar, and find a way that resonates with you. It could be breathing exercises. It could be music. Music's powerful. Could be some sort of grounding exercise. Digging in the dirt. I've been doing a lot of digging in the dirt since we closed down in March. Planting and, just getting your hands dirty and growing tomatoes or flowers or potatoes or something. It's very grounding to be connected to the earth, but it's not for everyone. Relaxation. How do you relax? How do you find time to relax? And I've met people, they talk to me and they've said, I can't relax. I can never really calm down or slow down. I'm always just, trying to keep up. I'm trying to keep up with everything, and I'm always running at 100 miles an hour. And yet we need to figure out how to slow us down before our bodies slow us down. And that stress takes over and magnifies. Building positive emotions is really clear that that's an important piece. If we can build those positive emotions, that can have a positive effect on us. And there are many ways of doing that we'll talk about today. Having more sources of positive energy in our life, fun, friends, and family. One of the reasons why people are so stressed out now with the coronavirus and the quarantines and lockdowns is that you're not able to have that fun, not able to connect with friends and family, that social aspect maybe. But we have to come up with creative ways of doing that now. And having positive energy in your life and positive sources of energy in your life will combat negative effects of stress. Hobbies like gardening, painting. You walk into a room, it was yellow, you painted it blue. You walk out and you said, I just changed the color of that room. You did something tangible. Sometimes something tangible is important when you're dealing with how to cope with events. Sometimes it's just finding a way to relax. And so that's something I hope you think about as we go through this hour, the rest of this hour. Just think about what connects with you, what resonates with you as we go to the rest of this information.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martinson. That was really helpful information. So now we are going to be turning it over to Adam Lush. So Adam, you can take it away.
Thanks, Allie, and thank you, Dr. Martinson. Listening to all of those coping strategies, I was thinking back on my experience and trying to find a place where I'd want to start this conversation. And I think I'm going to go right to one of the lowest moments in my life. I had started my freshman year of college. I had just changed dorm rooms. So I had moved all of my belongings. I had packed them up and moved them to a new dorm room. And my roommate had not moved in yet. And I was laying in my bed and my door was closed and there were kids outside in the hallway and they were laughing about something. And I had this sense that it was about me they were laughing at. And I was just full of fear and scared. And in that moment, I was thirsty and I wanted to go out and get a drink of water, but I was too afraid to because of just anxiety and just afraid that these kids in the hallway were, making fun of me. That was a night in my life where it was a very pivotal moment. Prior to that point, I'm going to give you a little bit of my history where, started using substances at a very young age, about 12 to 13 years old. And slowly over time, they became my primary tool to deal with stress. So up until that moment, that's really what I was relying on to get through really any challenging emotional experiences I had in life. I was leaning on using a substance whenever I felt any kind of discomfort. I was leaning on, whenever I felt boredom, that I would, just seek to find people that I could connect with and go drink or smoke pot or whatever substance it was at the time. And, that progressed through my high school and into, coming into college. And what happened was in that moment, I didn't have any of the substances available. And I had no internal coping skills to deal with the stress that every college student deals with on some level when you're introduced to a new environment and, there's a lot of new things to adjust to. And it's a bit of an upheaval in any college student's life when they're, going out into this new place and there's stress associated with it. for most people, they have tools that they've developed through their maturation into adulthood that can handle that. And I did not have any of those tools. So that was the night I realized that something had gone very wrong. You know, I was 19 years old. I'm sitting in a dorm room and I'm afraid to get a drink of water. So internally, something happened in me. You know, they call that in a recovery process, a lot of people say they hit bottom when they're describing the, you know, moment where they decided that enough was enough and they needed to get help. You know, I've heard it put that it's the point when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing. And that's what happened to me. You know, I realized that if something needed to change. I didn't know what. I just knew that I needed to do something different. What I had done to that point was not working. And it's a very fortunate moment in my life. You know, I look back at, you know, things I'm grateful for. This is something that I'm going to do a spoiler alert here for one of my strategies I use is gratitude. And I think it's probably one of the most powerful tools that I have in my arsenal as far as dealing with stress and dealing with, you know, challenges that I might be presented with in life, that I have the ability to consciously focus my mind on the things that I'm grateful for. And when I do that, I feel a completely different relationship to whatever circumstance that I'm in. And it's rare that with concentrated effort that I can't find more things to be grateful for than things to be stressed out or worried about or, you know, upset about or whatever it is. It's just a matter of consciously training myself to focus on gratitude. So looking back at that, you know, when I count the things I'm grateful for that night and that pain that I went through, I'm very grateful that I experienced it because it set in motion for me just a completely different shift in the trajectory that my life could have gone. You know, now working in substance use disorder treatment field and working with families and seeing, you know, people that took a different turn at that moment in their life and continued using substances to, you know, be their main resource to get through life and its challenges, and just the absolute devastation that brings to individuals, their families, really everybody surrounding them. I really look back and see how much pain I was spared by being able to experience the pain that I had in that moment fully. So I don't know necessarily what causes that, you know, what happens in someone's life where they decide, okay, now it's time to change, because change is really hard. And a lot of times it's forced on us, you know, by circumstance, but I think oftentimes it's comes from within, where there's something inside that we're not satisfied with. And, you know, we seek to, you know, make some changes in our behavior to remedy that. So that's really what happened to me in a big way. I found that there was something really wrong with what I was doing and I needed to change. Now, my problem was, I'm going to introduce this concept. It's called wind throw. So when a tree gets blown over by a very strong wind and it gets completely uprooted, that's called wind throw. And one of the things that causes that, it can be a couple of things, but if there's an area of trees where there's a lot of trees around in like an edge of a forest and a bunch of the trees are cut down, save a few that are still left standing, those trees are much more susceptible to being blown over by the wind. Much more so than a tree that was just grown on the side of a hill, you know, without other trees around that had, you know, kind of grown up with more exposure to wind over time. And, you know, what happens, and I'm sure many of you have heard that analogy, is that, you know, when a tree is exposed to a low level of stress, we'll call it the wind, it strengthens its roots, it strengthens its trunk, it becomes more resilient to more intense winds. You know, for me, I was like that tree that I had surrounded myself with all these unhealthy behaviors to artificially, you know, prop myself up, you know, through my adolescence, that when they were all gone, any small breeze was enough to blow me over. You know, I was just really kind of floundering and, you know, in a really tough spot. So what I needed to do was I needed to get some like solid supports around me, because on my own, I didn't have the resources to handle that stage of my life. I realized that pretty quickly. I reached out. I called my mom. That's something that, you know, I find is pretty common with young adults and adolescents that hit that wall where it's like, oh, first person I'm going to call is mom. And I knew she was available and I knew she could support me. So she actually came and picked me up and she got me connected to some resources. I got involved in, you know, some recovery support groups. I got connected to a bunch of individuals that, you know, were able to help me and guide me in a process where, you know, I really had to relearn how to live my life. And, you know, I had to avoid all of the challenges that, you know, would lead me to wanting to use substances. And if I had those kind of emotions come up, I needed people that I could call, that I could talk to, that I could lean on for support in those moments. And I was very fortunate in, you know, when I reached out, that support was there. And that's something I think that's unique to the college experience, is that, you know, a lot of people think, you know, they think various things when they think of what they're getting when they go to college, you know, that they're getting an education, that they're meeting friends, that, you know, maybe they can have fun and, you know, whatever it is. I don't think a lot of people really consider how much support they're engaging when they enter into a college environment. That, you know, these many colleges, and I know Immaculata is one of them, has a massive support network that is available at, you know, a moment's notice to any student that reaches out for it. And that's something I learned pretty quickly, that when I started to reach out for help, the help was available. And the more I did that, the easier things became for me, because the less I had to kind of handle on my own. And I was able to rely on some of that support to really learn those skills that I hadn't developed, like many of my peers, you know, had maybe developed on their own or, you know, through other variety of experiences. But I now have this support network that I could lean on. And I'll tell you, I don't know, you know, how these things work with timing, but, you know, as things went on, like I had a real big challenge about a year or so in. Or about 2 years into college, I was in a pretty serious relationship that fell apart, and I was just devastated. But now I had all these tools to handle that. So I reached out to people. I had a counselor at the time I could talk to. You know, I had all of these tools to lean on to get through that really challenging time. And, you know, I learned a little bit about grief and loss in that period. And so, you know, what's happening here is, like, I'm like that tree in the middle of the field that's, you know, the wind's hitting. I'm starting to get stronger over time. These stressful events in my life aren't blowing me over and uprooting me and, you know, being completely devastating. They're now things that, you know, while painful, can be moments that I can leverage to grow. That I can, you know, as I lean on supports and I learn these coping skills, I can start to develop, you know, better skills moving forward. And that's what happened with this situation. You know, a few years later into my college experience, I had, you know, gotten a whole new interest. I had shifted and started studying public health. I had focused my attention on integrative modalities. I started doing mindfulness-based stress reduction, took a course in that. I really liked meditation, yoga. You know, Dr. Martinson mentioned connecting with nature. I started a healthy habit of going on jogs, and around my campus, there was a really nice nature path that I could go to. And there were a few days I can think back to where, you know, I was just feeling stressed. And like my immediate response to that stress was putting on my running shoes and heading out into the woods and just running around and jogging and like being in nature and that, you know, connection that I felt there. And, you know, over time, you know, just developing like a spirituality, a sense that, you know, there was this, I was being supported. And that takes on many different forms from many different people. But, you know, for me, that just general sense that, you know, things were going to be okay, that I was being taken care of, and I could lean on that, and I could do things that kind of cultivated that experience. And that's, you know, back to what I said at the beginning, gratitude for me was the most powerful way, and still is, for me to cultivate that experience. When I, you know, count the things that I'm grateful for in my life, and even physically write a list. I've done that, you know, where I've listed out, you know, 10 things that I'm grateful for. And, you know, it's just things like that can be extremely powerful. But, you know, as time went on, you know, I went through even more and more challenges. But as I leaned on my supports and face these challenges, I began to grow that resilience that my peers had developed. So I no longer have to rely on substances to get through my life because I've turned to supports that are available. So that's for anybody. You don't have to be, taken to that bottom that I went to begin reaching out and accessing these supports. So it's a really important concept. If you are, heading down that path with substances, please, reach out, get some support with that. But if you're not, and it's just life stressful and you're not sure what to do, just reach out. And, I know, Jessica is going to be able to walk you through a lot of immediate resources that are available to you right on campus. So she'll be able to share that, but that's just an overview of some of my experience with that.
Thank you so much, Adam, for sharing that experience. I think, I really love that metaphor of the tree. And I think it's something that a lot of us can relate to, right? What are we surrounding ourselves with? Are we strengthening those roots? Or are we blowing over easily? So thank you again for sharing that experience with us. So next we will be turning things over to Christopher O'Reilly to talk a bit more about healthy coping and different strategies that you can use.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to start my piece of this presentation just kind of reminding everyone what Dr. Martinson said around how coping with stress can be very personal. So what works for one person could be very different than what works for another person. I would argue what relieves stress for some people creates stress for some. Adam talked about going for a jog. That might not be for everyone, right? So as much as coping with stress can be very personal, I wanted to talk about mindfulness as a strategy. It might be something that you're familiar with. It might be something that is a brand new idea. But I think it's something that's worth understanding a little bit better if it is a brand new idea, or maybe even if you've just read a little bit about it or have heard about it. The term mindfulness is a pretty popular term, and you see it a lot these days, mindful this, mindful that. And I think the reason why it's so popular is because there's a really good science behind mindfulness, science that highlights how effective it can be in managing stress and changing. It's almost like it creates a resilience in people so that they can tolerate stress a little bit better and maybe not be as negatively impacted by it. So for starters, what is mindfulness? And I'm going to expand that a little bit and say, what is meditation? Meditation, like a formal practice of meditation, is really where you create space in your life. It could be as simple as starting with 5 minutes. Some people find a way to practice an hour a day, but it's really creating space that you're not attempting to do anything other than be. And when I say be, I'm talking about just noticing what's happening moment by moment. It's something where rather than, I'll put it this way, the mind has the ability to be in 3 places at once. It can be preparing for the future, it can be reflecting on the past, and it can be in the present moment. While practicing meditation, the goal is to bring the mind into the present moment. And in doing that, it creates a sense of relief for the nervous system, for the body. Again, Dr. Martinson was talking a little bit about some of the different chemicals that the body creates to keep us healthy and to manage things. Mindfulness can help those things regulate and get back into a homeostasis. So there is so much wisdom in the present moment. And an example of that, and a good reason to practice meditation, is in practicing meditation, noticing what's happening here in this moment, you might become more aware of your stress level. Stress is one of those things that you hear all the time that you have to keep in check. You have to manage it. You have to not let it get too overwhelming. But you almost have to stop and pause and notice to really see where your stress level is in order to manage it. So I'll just kind of speak from personal experience, but in practicing meditation, sometimes what I'll notice is what's happening in my physical body. I might notice that there's tightness or tension. I might notice that I feel exhausted. I've talked to a lot of people who will practice meditation and they say, the second I try and slow down and practice meditation, I fall asleep. It's probably because you're pretty exhausted, something that stress can do. So it's almost like creating space to bring the mind into the present moment. And one of the ways to do that is to notice what's happening in the body. Another thing that you can do in a practice of meditation is notice what's happening in your thoughts. And you might notice patterns of thinking. And it's an opportunity to become more aware of what's going on in your mind. You might notice that your thinking is more negative, more the glass is half empty kind of things, which also can be a part of stress. The other thing I would say that you might notice in a practice of meditation is what's going on with you emotionally. You might notice a tightness in the chest, which could be anxiety. You might notice something in the belly that's maybe not digestion related, but just more emotional related. Because I truly believe, and science shows, that emotions live in the body. So during a practice of meditation, you can really get a sense of what that is. So just in the sense that creating space in your day to be present, to notice what's happening, not only does it give you awareness of what your body's trying to tell you and kind of tell you where your stress level it is, it also gives you an opportunity to pause and to breathe. You know, like I said earlier, the mind can be in 3 places at once. It can be in the past, it can be present, and it can be in the future. So imagine creating space in your day, could start again with 5-10 minutes, where you work on bringing the mind into the present moment. You could argue that that reduces 66% of your stress if it's typically in 3 places at once. We can get really stressed out about things that may or may not happen in the future. I think about worrying about a test, or worrying about grades, or worrying about where you're going to live next semester. I mean, working on top of taking classes. It can be extremely stressful. And it's not that you shouldn't plan ahead or prepare for those things, but there's really only this moment. So yes, you're going to prepare and plan, but can you create space in your day where you give yourself a break from that planning and preparing? When you give yourself a break from maybe that worrying. And the same goes from the past. You can create a lot of stress about things that have already happened, and you can experience a lot of stress about things that may or may not happen in the future. I wanted to talk a few minutes too just about, you know, taking the practice of mindfulness, again, paying attention to the here and now, and bringing it into everyday life too. So there's something what we call formal practice, where you literally take 10, 15, 20 minutes to sit in meditation or to follow a guided meditation, whatever it is. There's a lot of options out there. But then there's also the ability, when you're driving your car, to turn off the radio and just be present while driving the car. There's the opportunity when you're walking somewhere on campus or in the community, rather than listening to a podcast or, you know, thinking about where you're going, meaning like what you have to do when you get there, or thinking about things that happened in the past. Can you just be present in that walking and feel your feet under your body? Feel the connection with the sidewalk as you're walking. It could even be as simple as when you're brushing your teeth in the morning, can you just brush your teeth rather than rehearsing your whole day in your mind? What I'm really talking about is creating little breaks within the day to be present, to notice what's happening here and now, and just be even in the daily activities. I know driving is a big one for me, where I'll try and do that really mindfully. And even my morning routine. I used to wake up and immediately start thinking about the things I had on my agenda for the day, whether it was personal or professional. And sometimes it could be really stress producing. And I was getting all worked up before I even left the door. That's just not helpful to me, my overall stress level, or quite honestly, anything. So part of doing what I'm talking about requires a little bit of trust that if you're not prepping and preparing as much as you usually do, that you'll be okay. One other thing I wanted to kind of mention about just using aspects of mindfulness when it comes to managing stress is noticing the ways that we manage stress, again, because it can be very personal, and noticing if they're helpful or not. So for example, there's just some really basic ideas when it comes to managing stress. You know, make sure to get enough sleep, consider exercise, eat a plant-based or a whole food diet with, you know, limited sugar, caffeine, etc. These are the type of things that can help manage stress. Practice meditation, do things that you enjoy, connect to other people. But there's also things that we do in the short term, which might feel like they alleviate stress, but just be really mindful if they're alleviating stress or helping you to avoid the stress. A couple of examples might be, you know, you get home from a long day and having a few drinks. Is it actually alleviating the stress, or is it actually numbing the stress for a period of time? So it's almost like, are you truly addressing the stress, or are you avoiding the stress? The other thing that comes to mind for me is technology. When you have again, just I'm thinking you're in a stressful space, you might feel relaxed looking at social media or news or watching something, but is it really relaxing you, or is it just allowing you to avoid it for a period of time? Those are the things that I think with just some reflection and some awareness can be really, really helpful. So the only other thing I want to say, I just want to be mindful of our time here today, is that there's so many resources out there, great books, meditations on different apps, which are easy to find, and you can find tons of resources online too. So if anything, I would just encourage you to give yourself some space in your day just to be. It might not be following an app or a meditation. It could just be laying outside and you know, feeling the breeze, or just feeling the sunshine on your face. Part of the reason that stress is such a big issue in our culture is because we don't take time to pause and to notice. So I invite you to do that for yourself.
Thank you so much, Christopher. That was so helpful and amazing. So now if we could turn it over to Jess to talk to us a little bit about all of the amazing resources that are available to students at Immaculata University.
Sure, thanks, Allie. I'm Jess. Again, I'm the director of the Counseling Center at Immaculata University. And I'm going to talk a little bit about counseling services on campus, resources that we have, and then I have a few things that I wanted to mention towards the end. So if we could bring up our first slide, I can go over the hours and just basic information on counseling services. I think it's coming up. Here we go. Okay, so counseling services on campus is in the Bruder Center. It's a small building at the top of parking lot A. You can't miss us if you're on campus. And it houses counseling services and health services. Counseling services is comprised of myself, and we also have Kate Short, who is our other full-time counselor. She's my partner in crime in the counseling center. And then we also have 3 interns this year. 2 of them are from Westchester University and one's from Jefferson. And if you want to learn more about them, we have their faces and some information about them on our Instagram account, which I'll go over in a second. But all of us are seeing individuals for counseling. So to see us, you can email brudercenter@immaculata.edu. And we're doing counseling virtually right now. We're going to be doing it for the whole semester, and we're doing it through a platform called TheraLink. So it's like Skype or Zoom. It's a free platform that you can use to do a video chat with your therapist. We think it's convenient. You can do it from the comfort of your home or your dorm room. It's free, and I really like to drive this point home. If you go to other universities, there's usually a cap on counseling, or they they might charge like $10 a session. We don't do that at all. You can have counseling for the entire academic year, free of charge, unlimited sessions. So once a week. There are some students I've been seeing for 7 years who went through their undergraduate work in Immaculata and now are in a graduate program. And I'm still seeing them, and they've had 7 years of free counseling. So outside of the university, counseling can be expensive. And so, you know, if the spirit moves you at all to have counseling while you're on campus, we really encourage you to do that because it's free and we're nice people. And as I said, there's no session limits. And also a lot of students worry about this, but we are confidential. We follow the PA state guidelines. So, you know, you don't have to worry about a family member or a professor knowing about what we talk about. We are very serious about confidentiality. If we could go on to the next slide. Our available services this semester are individual counseling, which is like one-on-one with a counselor, and we do consultation and referral. So we do a lot of case management here at the Counseling Center. So if you are doing a paper on any kind of mental health topic and you want to have more information, you could email us and we could get that for you. If you have a friend who's dealing with a substance abuse issue or some other issue that is, you feel like you want to lend some support, you can talk to us and we can give you some guidance on that. If you want some sort of referral for off-campus treatment, we have a whole list of referrals in the area. We have really good relationships with many of the recovery centers in the area. So, you know, if you have any question about anything, you can always email or call us and we will really do our best to connect you. We also have crisis intervention. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Kate and myself are on call. We do a rotating on call. So if it's 3 in the morning and you're having some sort of crisis and you feel like it's an emergency, you can contact your RA or campus safety and they will put you in touch with the counselor on call. And our online programming, we're really trying to up our game this semester. So if you can follow us on IU Wellness, our Instagram account, we have lots of stuff happening this semester. Kate and I are doing a sort of like an advice column for mental health. So it's an Ask the Counselor series. It's live the first Friday of every month. So if you have any burning mental health questions, you can DM us on our Instagram account. And we will keep it anonymous, so we won't give any personal information, but we will answer those questions on our live feed. We also are doing a monthly panel discussion. Last month, about 2 weeks ago, we did a really fun discussion with some individuals out in the community on motivation and thriving during COVID. Next month, we're doing a fun dream panel. So if you have any dreams that you'd like us to analyze, you can let us know. You can email us or DM us on our Instagram account. And we actually have Dr. Jed Yaloff and Dr. Erin Kirschman from the psychology departments joining us. And my friend Mark that I'm roping in, who's a psychiatrist, is also joining us for that panel discussion. So that should be fun. And then we have body combat classes. We have our interns recording really great presentations that they're putting up on a Linktree link on our Instagram account. This presentation hopefully will be up there as well. So you'll have access to all of our recorded programming for the semester up there. So we love to, and I like to always do this pitch, we really love collaborating with students. So if you have any kind of idea that you just would love to do, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear about it. We love collaborating, and we have a few students that we do like ongoing programming with. So, so yeah, we would love to hear it. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. I just wanted to talk a little bit about all of the resources that are on campus. So you have counseling services, which you can always come to. We're confidential and free. But then we have this whole list of people on campus who are part of student life, who are part of at the academic side, who are really there for you. I really want to just kind of drive in the fact that we're a small college. We are a small community. And the thing that I love about Immaculata is that everybody really works together. So oftentimes if there's a student who's struggling and I get a call from somebody, you know, I already know about that issue, or if I call somebody else to kind of make sure that this person's getting support, they already know about the issue. You know, people really work together on this campus. And so, and I think oftentimes I'm really just, it's just kind of, it warms my heart to see that so many people are so engaged with the students. So I've had so many just professors, especially, who I don't often have a ton of day-to-day contact with, who might bring a student over and come into the session with the student and share to the student that they may have had an experience, a similar experience with themselves or with a family member. And it's such a powerful moment, I think, for that student to know that they're not alone in that. And so, you know, I think that we have a really special group of people on campus who can offer a lot of support. If you are someone who's struggling, I don't want you to ever feel like you're alone. This is not a punitive campus. And so, you know, whatever is put in place is there to support students. And again, you know, I don't want anyone to ever feel like they can't come forward if they're struggling, especially with the substance issue, because everybody is sort of on the same page about giving support and making sure that students can succeed. And I just want to, if we can go on to the next slide, I just want to go over a few things that I think are really important. And these are things that I talk about a lot in presentations and also in counseling. And a few of them were mentioned already with our wonderful presenters. But I just kind of want to go over them again, because I think these three things are free. You don't need apps for them. They're things that you can practice on a daily basis. And once you start to get in the practice of it, it really becomes something that becomes like almost an automatic thing. So the first thing I wanted to go over is flexibility. So we have our picture of the leaf in the stream. There's a Buddhist lesson that talks about being a leaf in a stream. You know, if you think about a leaf going down the stream, when it hits a rock, it doesn't just keep hitting the rock over and over again. It goes around the rock. It flows easily around the rock. And you want to think about how you can do that in your life. You know, there's so many things, can be chaotic, and there are so many things that are thrown at us. You know, and I think oftentimes people get in trouble when they're kind of stuck in this very inflexible way of being. You know, we have this idea of the way we want something to be. And if something changes that, it can be very anxiety producing for many people. We need to be, you know, we need to think about things in a different way. There's something in counseling called turning your mind. It's just looking at something from a different perspective. I often use the idea, like right now we're dealing with COVID-19, and people can't see the people that they care about. They want to see their friends, they want to see family members, and many times we can't do that. And so, you know, I'm hearing a lot from students and other people, and myself, I'm also included in this. You know, we feel frustrated, we feel upset that we can't be on campus or we can't be around the people that we love. You know, and that's a very valid feeling. We're all, you know, experiencing that. So it is important to process that. But, you know, is there another way that you can view that? So we have this one idea that this is a frustrating thing, and it's very valid. But if you stay in that space, it's not helpful for you. And so, you know, what can you do to kind of have a different perspective so that you can move forward? And I've had a lot of really great answers from students in the past about this. But one is working on yourself. You have, right now, things have slowed down, you know, that we have a lot of time to do stuff that we wouldn't normally have the time to do. And this is sort of a gift, right? And so this is a time that we can really focus on working on ourselves. I have a friend who is growing giant pumpkins just because she has always wanted to do that. My husband ordered like a sketching book and is trying to learn how to sketch. There's so many fun things that I've looked and seen people start doing just because they have the time to do that. There was that whole sourdough bread craze that was happening like in the springtime. You know, doing things like that can really build mastery and build your self-worth. And so, you know, you could see this time as, yes, it's a frustrating time. Yes, you know, I can't be around the people that I care about. I can't be on campus taking classes. Well, hopefully you will be soon. But, you know, what can I do with this time that is helpful for me and helps me move forward? The second thing I wanted to talk about is grit. And I think this is so important, and this kind of is tying into something that some of the other presenters have talked about. I think, you know, currently, and this has been happening for a little bit, we really try to make things so easy for us. We have our smartphones, you know, I feel like we have all these things put in place to skip steps, you know, and make things just easier and easier. And I think the problem with this is that we're not really learning how to sit with discomfort. We're not learning how to build mastery and you know, and have opportunities to grow. My son is in 4th grade, and his teacher sent home this really great story about a butterfly in a cocoon. And a man walked by and he saw the butterfly in the cocoon, and the butterfly was struggling to get out of the cocoon. So he ripped the cocoon open a little bit to allow the butterfly to escape. And what happened was the butterfly was just not able to fly after that. And I guess what happens with butterflies is that they have to struggle as they leave the cocoon for a long while so that they can build, I don't know if butterflies have muscles in their wings, you know, I don't know how that works, but they have to struggle so they can build up those wings, they can build up their body so that they can be able to fly. So that struggle is building mastery, it's building skill. And I think that's such, I loved that story that she sent home, and I've just been thinking about it a lot because I think it really captures this. There are so many times where we're feeling discomfort, we feel anxiety, we feel stress, we feel sadness, we feel grief. And there's so many times where I've talked with students and they're afraid to feel those things because society tells us that they're not, quote, good emotions to have, right? But we want to really sit with those emotions. Those emotions are important. They're part of our life, right? And so we need to kind of think about how we can grow in those moments. We can tolerate the feeling, and then we can grow. And I think that is so important, especially if you're in recovery. You know, oftentimes people are using substances to be able to cope, as Chris said, you know, to be able to cope with stronger emotions that are happening in their life. And you know, we really want to be able to kind of sit back and be able to tolerate that, you know, figure out some way that we can, in a healthy way, work through that feeling and build the skill while we're sitting there. And the third thing I wanted to talk about was gratitude. So Adam I was so happy to hear that Adam touched on this. This is such an important thing. I know for myself, since COVID hit back in the spring, you know, I think everyone was feeling very frustrated, and I was feeling frustrated that I couldn't see friends. I was really like having Zoom fatigue. And, you know, someone had mentioned gratitude to me, and I really started putting that in practice. I really started to think about every day, how can I really notice the beautiful things that are happening, or the things that make me feel at peace, or the things that make me feel excited about life. And there's so many small things that happen during the day that we just don't notice because we're not opening our eyes to it. And I noticed that once I started doing that, it just almost became automatic. After a couple weeks, I just, you know, was just always looking around and noticing things that made me feel happy on the inside. And I know that this is just like a very low level thing, but the thing is that the more you do that, the more it starts to layer on itself. So it becomes this onion. And then you have this big, you know, feeling of happiness and gratitude and calmness that really like weighs with the stress that you're feeling. And so it really helps balance that, and it helps us cope. You know, I think oftentimes we get stuck in this feeling of stress, and we get stuck in these harder feelings. But there are lots of moments that happen each day that really, you know, that we can kind of build that reservoir of gratitude and happiness. There's a huge spider that's building a huge web in my porch. And at first I was like a little freaked out, but then I started looking at it and I was like, wow, this is a really amazing spider. And you know, I know my husband keeps making fun of it, but you know, every time I leave, I just look at the spider and I just kind of like wave, because it's just so fun. And it's like our little spider pet. But a moment like that has made me feel happy. And that's just one of those moments that can kind of layer on each other. I know that Adam when we had a meeting about this presentation before, Adam had mentioned a moment where he was just running and kind of just like was laying down under the stars and looking up at the sky. And moments like that are just so powerful. It really helps us feel centered and feel at peace. So that's all I've got. But please come to the counseling center and get some support from us. We really would love to see you guys, and we're so excited that people will be back on campus soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jess. So now we're going to go to some questions, and I think that there have been so many great topics brought up today. And Jess, one thing that I was wondering about is, so we talked today about the concept of positive stress, negative stress, and anxiety, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we can use words like stress and anxiety interchangeably.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk a little bit about the differences between what we would consider normal, manageable stress versus anxiety where you should really seek treatment or support?
Sure. Yeah. I think, stress, like Dr. Martinson had said, there are lots of positive reasons why you might feel stress. I really feel like oftentimes stress is just a natural response to you engaging in the world, so it could be making a new friend, it could be trying a new hobby or putting yourself out there in some way, but it's just like a natural response to that, which I think is a healthy thing. It might not be the most comfortable feeling in the world, but it's something you can channel and use as energy and use to drive you. But I think anxiety is when it starts to get out of control. When you think about like your day-to-day life, stress isn't something that you should feel every day. It's something that really is a response to you doing something that might be unexpected, new, whatever, everyone has a different reason why they might feel stress. Anxiety is something that you might notice it happens on a daily basis. It's something that kind of starts to intrude on your daily life. If it's something that you're noticing over time is not going away, and you're starting to feel it on a daily basis and you can't kind of shake it, then I think we're bordering on anxiety territory, and that would be a great reason for you to come to counseling.
Absolutely. And then along those lines, and Chris, I'm wondering if you could speak to this as someone who really works with people struggling with substance use disorders and in early recovery. So there's a lot of different types of treatment for anxiety, right? And I think one thing that sometimes we can want is just a pill to fix it, right? That if I take a medication, it's going to make me feel better. Could you talk about the different types of medications that are sometimes used to treat anxiety, and if those can ever in and of themselves create problems for people?
Yeah, so as far as talking about the different medications, we have a consulting psychiatrist, so that's what I would say, meeting with a psychiatrist and I would really encourage one that either has a strong awareness or maybe works in correlation with an addiction treatment center, because one of the things I'll say about anxiety medications is, yes, they're helpful, but a lot of them can also be abusable. So we just have to be really mindful about that. So that's a really important piece. So, what might be helpful in the short term could create a different type of problem. But, when it comes to anxiety, it can be extremely overwhelming and it can be extremely difficult to deal with. So I do think there are times that it's very appropriate to consider medication. But I would also say that there's other strategies that are used in combination with or in correlation with, as I'm even thinking about, what was said earlier, you have a headache, you take an aspirin, it goes away, but what's causing the headache? I can even give an example of that. I had headache issues and dealt with them for a while, but then seen a chiropractor and no headaches because there was something that needed to be adjusted. So medications can be really helpful, especially if they're really overwhelming anxiety. But I would really encourage some type of counseling center, right, that's available to all the students, or a therapist that can help figure out what the underlying issues are.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Does anybody else want to jump in? Dr. Martinson, I'm wondering if you would want to speak to that a little bit as well, this idea of the difference between anxiety, stress, and how we treat or how we manage anxiety and stress.
Yeah, I think it's important to pay attention to what's going on in the body. What Chris mentioned and Jess has talked about, and Adam, has talked about in his story, is that it may be subtle initially. You may not be aware of what's going on. And then you kind of have this wake up call that maybe something's not right. And being able to notice what's going on with you, pay attention to what's happening in your body and how you are reacting to what's going on in your life. I think that's really the most important piece. And then the second part for me is being willing then to talk to somebody about it. You know, reaching out that's a big leap for many people. You can struggle with this on your own. You can be sitting with this, and you can be sitting with this for a while maybe, and yet just reaching out to someone who can talk to you about this. You know, whether it's a friend or a family member or the counseling center or anyone that might be able to listen to you, being able to take that first step, I think, can be difficult, and talk about this, and be able to have that different perspective. Because being able to go through this experience of your reaction to stress and being able to get an objective perspective on this might help sort all of those things out. Just a few things I was thinking about.
Absolutely. And Adam, from the perspective of a student who did reach out for support, what were some of the first steps that you took? So I know you mentioned that you called your mom, which I think is a great thing to utilize the support system that you have in your family. But in terms of getting connected to services, how was that experience for you, and what did you do?
So initially I relied on family, and I was fortunate to have some family members that had some experience with recovery from substance use disorder. So they were able to connect me with some local support groups, where I then met some other individuals who were kind of dealing with similar issues. Going through some local 12-step fellowship groups was a big part of my early process. Reaching out, connecting with counseling. I believe I saw the counselor on my university's campus at one point. And then I got connected with a counselor off campus, for additional support. That led to, connecting to more groups. I did some experiential group work. So there's some really interesting things out there if you really want to go deep and, have a unique experience. This is something too, I know there's a lot of like counseling students and nursing students potentially on this call, but I highly encourage, there's ways like you can go visit these support groups, as kind of a observer, just to kind of see what goes on at these places. It's just good to know kind of what support and activities are out there for people and kind of get a feel for them. But yeah, I really, and then just through a series of just ongoing connections with different people and resources. And then I got connected on campus. I became a resident assistant. I want to talk about that too. Like, and even like working at Caron now, like when you work in this field and you go this direction, you start getting support yourself too. So like a lot of the tools that I was learning to be a successful resident assistant were also useful, just life skills in general. So, that kind of thing can be really useful also.
Yeah, and it almost sounds like getting started can be the hardest part, but then you start to build momentum in terms of knowing which resources to reach out to, knowing who to ask for help. Jess, is that something that you find with some students who might be a little wary the first time that they come into the counseling center?
Yeah, definitely. That's why, I think Kate and I really like to get our faces out there because, I think unfortunately there is a little bit of a stigma still. And also it's just scary. What do I expect? So, I think we really try to just get our faces out there, try to interact with the students as much as possible. And even if a student, we all kind of are trying to help support a student and they're just not ready yet. Usually what happens is I'll have someone just bring them over and meet us just for 5 minutes. Because once they come in the building and they meet one of us, they generally see that, oh, this isn't so bad. This isn't so scary or uncomfortable as I thought. And so, it's a 5-minute hi, here's my card, but I think that just that meeting makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. And most of the time that student will reach back out through email. So yeah, definitely. I think that happens a lot.
That's so helpful. And then, I'm even wondering, could you speak a little bit about what a student would experience the first time they came in for a session at the counseling center? Because I think that's also usually the unknown, right? The big scary unknown.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I think it depends on what they want. Most students who are coming to us, would like some extended counseling. And so what we usually do is we have some paperwork that's like a 4-page document. It's not a lot of stuff. You can usually check off a lot of that stuff. So it's not that long, that you would fill out. You would give that back to us. And then you would meet us for about an hour and we would do an intake. And so the intake is really just a way for us to kind of get to know each other. We ask a lot of questions about family background, mental health history, symptoms, things like that. And then really just ask more questions about why you're seeking counseling. And then usually at the end of that session, we think about like, what do we want to work on here? What are some goals that you would like to have in counseling? And then after that, we start to try to work on those goals. So that's kind of like what someone would see if they wanted, at least a couple sessions of counseling. But if we also have people who want to just meet with us one time, and that's fine too. We're really, because we don't take insurance, we don't take any money or anything like that. We can kind of do what we want here, so we really try to cater this to what the students want. So if somebody just wants to meet with us one time for like 25 minutes, then we make that work for them, just to kind of get through whatever hurdle they have for the day. So, we really try to be flexible to the students' needs. This isn't like a structured program.
That's really good to know. And we have a few questions that have come in. One being, have you noticed that students are more likely to reach out more recently, now that mental health is being talked about more on campus? And is the stigma around some of these issues that I think most people struggle with, is that stigma going down?
I think was that for me? I don't want to answer.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, let's keep going. So yeah, I think for sure. I think definitely the stigma has gone down. We have so many more students who are coming in with previous therapy experience, which we didn't really see before. I know 7, 8 years ago when I started here, that wasn't something that I often saw. But a lot of students, I would say at least half of the students that are coming in to see me now have had either some history of counseling or actually have a counselor at home and they want to just transfer to counseling here. So I think just in general, society's talking more about counseling. They're talking more about the support that happens. It's so nice to have somebody who doesn't know anything about your situation, isn't part of your family, isn't like a friend giving advice, just have someone to bounce things off of. So, yeah, we definitely have seen that. But I think, also because of COVID, I think people are just kind of being pushed a little bit more with their stress level. My coworker and I have talked a little bit about how we feel like everyone's just feeling like this low level of stress, even if you have, even if you haven't lost your job or like haven't had anything, you haven't, experienced anyone getting sick. There's still this low level of stress just going through a pandemic. And I've noticed that there's definitely been more students reaching out because of that, because they just feel kind of just overwhelmed with life a little bit more now because they have this lower level of stress happening because of COVID. So, and people are, I think also one good thing about all of us being online is that a lot of us are on social media now. We're all trying to reach out to students, and students are interacting with each other on social media through Instagram or our app. And I think there's more sharing of information that way sometimes because they can, they may not, if they're talking on campus, there's like just a few of them talking about this issue, but if they put something on Instagram, like they're part of a club or whatever, they have a whole community of people, of students who are seeing that and then interacting with them. And so I think a lot of this information and support is happening actually more now because we've really upped our game with the social media presence and just interacting with students online and then with each other.
Absolutely. And we had another question that came in on the topic of medication. So while we don't have, as Chris mentioned, we don't have a psychiatrist on the panel today. Chris, I am going to direct this question to you, and that is, what if people don't feel comfortable taking medication in treatment of their anxiety? Is that okay? Do all medications numb other feelings, or are you able to feel emotions on them? Just more sort of general understanding of medications that might be used to treat anxiety.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of respond to the first part of that, Allie. And, I think, y- I think and I hope that, psychiatrists that people meet with would kind of meet the individual where they're at. If there is what I would consider more of just like a level of anxiety that's real, it's causing distress, it's concerning, but it's not debilitating. It's not, the individual's not having panic attacks, or the individual's, able to just kind of function in the day to day. I think there's a lot of strategies that not only are possible, but some that might not, a psychiatrist might not even be real helpful with, quite honestly. Changing the way that you eat, adding exercise, adding meditation, creating space to connect with people that you trust, and that just there's something just powerful about relational connection. you know um it can be so impactful. So it's almost like there's so many different pieces of the puzzle. So even if someone does go on a medication, I still really strongly encourage people to look at their lifestyle, because too much caffeine can cause an experience of anxiety. A really poor diet can cause someone to feel overwhelmed and anxious, not getting enough sleep. I mean, there's so many, I'm talking about like what's truly underneath the anxiety. And it could be just therapy, like if someone has some fears or some things that they're worrying about. Um, I had the opportunity when I first got involved, Adam mentioned mindfulness-based stress reduction. There's 8-week courses out there that could teach you, and you can engage in mindfulness-based stress reduction, which could be massive in regards to helping someone manage their anxiety. So if someone's hesitant with medicine, I would, pay attention to that part of you that's hesitant. But I would also say, there might be certain circumstances where you need to consider, right? Um, it's very individualized for the person.
Thank you so much.
I do. I have a comment on that as well, and it's related to some upcoming events that we have. But it's such a complicated process. Really just substance use disorder treatment in general, addiction medicine. So if you're really interested in a deep dive into kind of what's going on with research, best practices, things of that nature, we have 2 really cool events coming up. And these are going to have the top professionals in addiction medicine talking about issues related to best practices in treatment. We have the ASAM fundamentals course coming up, as well as the research symposium. If you check in the chat too, I also shared those links. So an exciting announcement we have for any nursing students that are on the call. We do have some complimentary passes for nursing students that would like to attend this program. So just email me at the email indicated in the chat, and we'll see if we can get you set up with one of those complimentary passes. But this again, looking at this holistically, I mean, substance use disorder, addiction, mental health concerns, they really impact all areas of someone's life. Internal physiological changes, external relationship issues. I mean, there's so many pieces to this puzzle in addressing these concerns. So, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to that, unfortunately, I don't think we'll have time to dive too far into today. But if you want more info, there's also plenty of additional resources available.
Absolutely. And I just want to thank all of our presenters today. I think everybody shared a really unique perspective and some extremely helpful, practical information that we can use to get support. And I just want to say, if anyone does feel like they're struggling with stress, struggling with anxiety, struggling to cope, if we've learned anything today, there are a lot of resources out there, and those resources can be individualized. Chris talked about that puzzle that we put together, right? So we can take a lot of pieces, and I think specifically at Immaculata University, you have an amazing team in place. So reach out to Jess, reach out to Dr. Martinson, reach out to that long list of staff members available to you. And also feel free to reach out to us if, as Adam says, you have more questions about substance use disorders, more questions about the science of addiction and really understanding all of this, because it is a whole lot. But we are really grateful for this opportunity to talk with all of you today. And we thank you and have a great rest of your day.